Hello, everyone. Good evening. People would start coming in. The bar is open. We will be starting to serve dinner, I believe, in a few minutes. So if you guys want to come take your seats, I'll go over some of the things that I have to go over. First of all, I want to welcome everyone to the South Plains Kidney Foundation Kidney Disease Update 2024 with Covenant Health. The physicians, this activity is planned for and implemented in accordance with the accreditation requirements and policies of the Texas Medical Association. You guys will get 2 AMA PRA Category 1 credits for this evening. Disclosures of commercial interest. All speakers and planners of this activity have no relevant financial interest. The activity is provided by Covenant Health, and they have no commercial support has been received, no product will be endorsed, and speakers will notify the audience if off-label drug use will be discussed. So, requirements for successful completion. To receive your contact hours, you need to make sure that you've signed in on the roster at the front, stay for the entire education, and then complete the evaluation form at covenanthealth.inreachce.com. And I can put that up at the end. And then I guess I should introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. My name is Amy, and I'm the director of the South Plains Kidney Foundation. We have put on this conference for the last, I don't know how many years, but it's been wonderful. I don't know, 5. I've been doing this for 10 years now, so I guess 10 years. This is for tomorrow. But I just want to make sure, and I think you guys all did see the sponsors and everything. So Thursday evening sponsor is actually Covenant Internal Medicine Grant. They provide that for us so that we can have this event on Thursday evening. Tomorrow's event, that one is for nurses, social workers, dietitians, nurse practitioners. We do CNE and CEUs. So physicians are more than welcome to come. It's just we don't have the CME credits for you, but you're welcome to come. Friday evening event sponsor tomorrow is Covenant Health Kidney Disease Surgery Clinic. The breakfast sponsor is UMC Transplant Services and UT Southwestern, and the lunch sponsor is CareDx with AlloCare. The other exhibitors, and they're all out there except for one, I think, or 2. Akebia Therapeutics, Baylor Scott and White Transplant, Caladitas Therapeutics, Covenant Health Kidney Disease Surgery Clinic, Covenant Center for Wound Care, and Hyperbaric Medicine. Fresenius Medical Care is here, Hospice of Lubbock, Methodist Transplant Institute, San Antonio, Outset Medical, South Plains Rehab Hospital, Texas Tech University Health Science Center, Internal Medicine, UMC Health System with UT Southwestern, and UMC Ambulatory Infusion Center. And these are all sponsors, and we did get a donation from the Foundation of Nephrological Science as well. So I just wanted to thank everybody. This is tomorrow's speakers. So all the speakers tonight, there's 3 speakers this evening. Dr. Biondi actually is sick, so she was not able to come tonight. But we do have Dr. Wojciechowski coming to speak instead. So we'll get those speakers in a minute, and they are speaking tomorrow as well, but we do have other speakers if people are interested in coming. Just real quick, the South Plains Kidney Foundation, we are trying to promote awareness and conduct programs in professional and patient community services, supporting research and organ donation. We actually, all the proceeds that we get, all the donations, help patients locally in the Lubbock and West Texas area. We're not affiliated with any national organization, so like I said, everything stays local to help the patients in this area. We have a couple events. I just want to tell you real quick. We do have a patient and family symposium that's free. We do that in the fall. And we would love for you guys to direct your patients and people that are interested in CKD and ESRD and things like that. We have great speakers that come to that as well. And then, of course, our medical professional symposium. March is Kidney Awareness Month, so we have a couple events coming up. Main event on March 14th. We do a fundraiser there. And then Splash Fest. Last year, I have to say, we had 117 people come to Splash Fest last year. And thank you to all the donors and shirt sponsors and all that. So hopefully next year we'll have a big turnout as well. We do have a support group also. So if you do have patients that want to just talk to people or, find out some information, we have a support group quarterly. So we'd love to have people come to that. And I do have a little flyer out there. And I think that's it for me right now. So our first speaker, we're going to have dinner served as well. So eat and listen at the same time. We're going to have Dr. Wojciechowski come and speak first. So let me get his slides ready. And if you'll come up here, you are the Medical Director of UT Southwestern Kidney Transplant, Associate Professor of Medicine and Surgery. I have to look at the cheat sheet.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Does this one work?
It does, but you have to get real close. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do.
You guys can hear me, right? Oh.
That's okay, it'll come back on. Just give it a minute.
Okay, perfect.
It'll come back on. Yeah, it'll come back on, I think. I did that earlier. Yeah, hold on, it's coming. There you go.
Okay. Right.
And then you have the
Sorry
clicker.
All right. Well, pinch hitting a little bit here.
Yes.
I'll go through this a little quickly because I know we have 3 speakers tonight, right?
Yeah,
This
each have
talk
about
was
40
designed for
minutes.
tomorrow, which was the longest time slot. So.
About 40 minutes still.
It is? Okay,
Uh-huh.
all right. Well,
Right? Is that right? No, sir.
40. So I'm talking about demystifying kidney allocation. I have no disclosures related to this presentation. So what does that mean? What does the title of my talk really mean? So I thought I'd kind of go over, when you're setting up an organ allocation system, what are the goals that you should really have in mind as you're setting it up? What is the current system that we use in the United States? What are sort of the allocation rules that we have to follow? As you know, there have been a lot of changes in that in the last couple of years. And then I'll talk about a few elements that we'll consider when we're getting an organ offer and what we look at when we decide if we're going to accept that organ and sort of how we make some of those decisions and what factors play into that. And then sort of how that has played out in our program in terms of getting patients transplanted and how those outcomes turn out. So all of you know this. What are the goals of kidney transplant? 2 main goals of any transplant really are to help you live longer and give you better quality of life. There's a lot of data that supports this in kidney transplantation. This was the first seminal paper back in 1999 by Wolf, where they showed the relative risk of death at 18 months post-transplant was 0.32 compared to remaining on dialysis. And you can see you do have a slight uptick in that figure of mortality or relative risk of death early after transplant, which you get after any surgery, really. And then after about 106 days in this figure, you can see it goes down, dips below the dotted line, which represents the dialysis patients who have not been transplanted. That was older data. This is more current data. This paper was from 2018. Looks very similar to the Wolf figure, as you can see. And then on the right side, looking at the bars, looking at different groups of patients based on age, sex, do they have diabetes, what the cause of ESRD. You can see pretty much across the board, you get a survival benefit of transplantation compared to remaining on dialysis. And in terms of quality of life, this was a nice study looking at 3 groups of patients who are awaiting transplant, those who have been transplanted, that's the middle bar, and then the general population, that's the black bar. You can see that those who've been transplanted have these self-reported health perceptions that come very close to what you see in the general population, so physical functioning, overall general health perceptions, et cetera. They are far greater than what's seen in a patient awaiting transplant, and very close to what you see in the general population. And this was a nice paper looking at cohort of dialysis patients and then looking at cognitive testing pre-transplant and then looking at a post, and they found that there was significant reversibility of memory issues that they had once they were transplanted. So quality of life also seems to get better if you are able to transplant patients, but here's here's the rub. As you know, there are a lot of people waiting. So this top figure are new kidney transplant listings in the United States from 2008 to 2020. Yes, that second from the top line is 40,000. So you can see that's a lot of people getting listed. The bottom right figure are those who are already listed and waiting. And yes, that second from the top line is 100,000 in 50,000 increments. So there's a lot of people waiting for transplants. And what's the problem? I just pulled this a couple days ago, right before I sent these slides to Amy. This is direct from UNOS's website. Sorry, it's a little small. If you look in 2023, we did 27,000 kidney transplants. So way less than the number of people that actually need them. So there's the conundrum. And as you know, once you're listed for transplant, particularly in some parts of the country, on the coast especially, you can face very, very long waiting times. So this is looking at what happens to you once you're listed for transplant 3 years later, 3 years after listing. So these are patients who were listed in 2015, and then what happened to you 3 years later. And you can see that almost 40% of them are still waiting for that transplant, essentially. And I think what's even more sobering when you look at this is, if you look at that gold line, those are those who were removed from the list. That's 20%. So they either became too sick or had some medical issue that prevented transplant. And then if you look at the sort of, I don't know, greenish turquoise line, those are those who died waiting. That's approaching about 10%. So a large majority of patients have not undergone transplant or removed from the wait list or died 3 years after they were listed for transplant. So we clearly have a problem. And we know that the longer you wait for transplant, the higher your risk of mortality is. This is looking at time on dialysis and mortality rates per 1,000 dialysis patient years. The good news in this figure, in my mind, is that dialysis patients are seeing a reduction in mortality risk. And you can see that over time. But you can see that based on how long you've been waiting on dialysis, your risk of dying does go up. So that top line is greater than 5 years on dialysis. You have a much higher relative risk of death compared to those who have been on dialysis for less than 2 years. So the longer you wait for your transplant on dialysis, the higher your risk is of dying before you get your transplant. So what do we have? We have a scarce resource, a supply-demand problem essentially, and unfortunately that means we have to have some allocation criteria and rules that we have to follow to try to organize all this and get people transplanted as best as possible. So what are the guiding principles when we're setting up an allocation system? I'd say the two main guiding principles that we follow, and I think most systems follow, are these concepts of equity or fairness, and then you're balancing that with utility or efficiency. So utilizing as many organs as you can, and on the other side, the equity fairness piece of it, making sure that you're not disadvantaging anybody for any particular reason, that you're trying to make it as fair as possible. And on this figure, you just see a couple of things that have kind of played into recent allocation changes that led to the updates that we have currently. So on the equity fairness side, you see issues about how long people waited. You can look at, are they sensitized and why are they sensitized? Ethnic minorities, we'll talk a little bit about that. Is there any medical urgency need? I will tell you, in kidney transplantation, that doesn't play into it quite as much. You can, in theory, ask for some exceptions for patients who have access problems and are losing access. I found it actually quite hard in Texas to get through. California, everyone's very nice. Everyone, if you ask for that, they give it to you. I've been turned down twice here since I've been to Dallas, because all the other centers in your region have to agree to it. So if they don't agree to it, you don't get it. But anyway, on the utility or efficiency side, some things that have come down the pipe are things about longevity matching. I'll talk about that shortly, and some issues with HLA matching. I'm not going to get too much into that, but so there are all these sort of give and takes and push and pulls that we're trying to follow when we're setting up the system and we're trying to decide how we're going to essentially parse out these organs that need to go to people who need them. So I put in quotes the new system. So this was a big update that happened in 2014 that I'm sure many of you had heard about when it came around. So there were a couple of intents of this update. So there was an attempt to do better longevity matching. I'll talk about that. There was an attempt to improve the equity of the system with fairness. So one of the things that was done was this backdating of dialysis time. I'm sure all of you know about this. So if you send us a patient for transplant evaluation and they're already on dialysis, that dialysis time counts for them. Prior to 2014, it actually did not count for them. So if you sent me somebody who had been on dialysis for 5 years, those 5 years were lost for them, essentially. Now it counts. There was some addition of some ABO essentially incompatible transplantation. It's not truly compatible in a sense, I'll explain that later, but that's called non-A1 or A1B to B. And then there was some access for sensitized patients that was added, which I'll talk about. And there was an attempt to improve the efficiency of the system by trying to get better utilization of high KDPI kidneys. And I'll talk about that later as to why that's important to use these high KDPI kidneys and not waste them. So this was the longevity attempt, the matching of longevity. So, and this looks at two numbers that are calculated, KDPI and EPTS. KDPI is the Kidney Donor Profile Index. This is a score that's given to the donor. So this is a value from 0 to 100. It attempts to assess the relative risk of kidney graft failure for a given donor compared to the median risk in the donor from the prior year. So it's kind of a moving target year to year to some extent in terms of how it gets calculated and in terms of what number these variables will give you. But these are the variables listed under KDPI that go into the equation that spits out the number essentially. So when we get an organ offer, every organ is given this KDPI number. And this replaced the old language that many of you may remember that we used to call it ECD, expanded criteria donor kidney. That was, and then your alternative was your standard criteria donor. So it was a very dichotomous kind of split in terms of the quality of the kidneys that you were told. This is more of a continuous variable from 0 to 100. So anything 85 or greater is considered what we call high KDPI kidney. And then now what they tried to do in this updated system was to match these lower KDPI kidneys, so quote better kidneys, with low EPTS score recipients. EPTS is expected post-transplant survival. This is also a 0 to 100 score. The lower the number, the better your expected survival post-transplant. The higher the number, the higher your risk of dying post-transplant in a short amount of time. And it looks at your age, your dialysis time, have you had a prior transplant, are you diabetic? So there was an attempt to try to match these, and I'll show that in a few more slides where I'll actually show you the entire table of how the algorithm system runs. The next thing that was attempted was to try to improve access for sensitized patients. So this is, again, more of this equity fairness issue because many patients who are sensitized are women for pregnancies. And then other sensitized patients include African-American patients in particular who sometimes had received some blood transfusion and weren't getting regular medical care, found that they had CKD late, received blood, et cetera. So there was sort of this disparity in terms of who was sensitized. And the way we used to get CPRA points was really, again, kind of a yes-no kind of situation. If your CPRA was over 80, you got 4 extra points, and that was it. They moved it to this continuous variable again, where as you get a higher CPRA, you get more and more points. Such that if you have a CPRA of 99, you get 50 extra wait time points added to your listing. So it really gives you additional wait time to get those offers to you and open up those offers so you can get transplanted more quickly. And this actually did work quite well. So you can see prior to 24s who were 98 to 100% CPRA is very low. It was less than 5%, or less than 5 per 100 waitlist years. And when this got implemented, you see the huge spike happen, and then it kind of leveled off and it's been pretty stable, kind of around that 15 per 100 waitlist years, kind of mirroring more of the lower CPRA patients. So this was an example of a policy that really, I think really worked and helped out these patients who were highly sensitized. The backdating of HD time, this was also an attempt to try to improve the fairness, and this is some of the results of that. So I kind of put the box around the top line, so you can see the green are those who had 4 to 6 years of dialysis time, and the gold are 6 to 11. You can see there was a slight uptick in that when this got implemented. And that was a lot of patients getting this time added back because you were allowed to backdate it. And then it kind of leveled off as well. But overall, it's gone up compared to what it was prior to 2014. So not as dramatic as what we saw with the CPRA numbers, but certainly have helped more patients get transplanted by getting this backdated. And then I mentioned this non-A1 to B. So this is giving basically a non-A1 kidney to a B recipient. So there's actually a couple subtypes of A blood type. A1 is the one you really can't cross the ABO barrier with. Actually, you can. No one really, I don't think anyone really does it anymore because there's other ways to do the transplant. We used to do it when I worked at UCSF, and there was always an AMR, chronic rejection, things like that. But anyway, but the non-A1s, you can cross that barrier. And why is this important? So if you look at the data, let me just scroll through here. Okay. So if you look at the data, if you look at Caucasian or white patients, about 54% of them will get their kidneys from deceased donor. This is in contrast to African American and Hispanic patients, who almost 80% of them are relying on deceased donor for their kidney. And then if you look at blood types, blood type B is predominantly of minority candidates. So 71% of blood type B candidates are minorities, so African American, Hispanic. And as many of you know, blood type B across all regions I've worked in, and anytime you look at it at SRTR map, always have the longest waiting times. Blood type B, it's just a blood group that waits the longest compared to the other blood groups. So why this transplant is possible, I kind of alluded to this. There's a very low expression of A1 on the kidney compared to not A1 on the kidney compared to A1. So if you can take a patient, a recipient who has a low anti-A titer, you can actually get away with this transplant without doing anything different than you would for a normal transplant. So we do have a protocol for this. So if we have a B candidate who comes to see us, they all get titers checked. And if you have a low titer, so less than 1.4, you're considered eligible for this. Essentially, we just monitor those titers periodically in those patients. If you have a high titer greater than 8, then you're not eligible. We may recheck this down the road to see if it drops. It does sometimes it doesn't, but that's kind of our cutoff, and that's what allows a patient to be listed to get one of these non-A1 or A1B kidneys if they're a B blood type. And did this help? It actually did. So if you look at the transplant rates, this is direct from UNOS. If you look at patients who are B blood type and are not eligible for the non-A1 protocol, they have transplant rates of 0.14 per patient years. This is in contrast to those who are eligible. They have transplant rates of 0.43 per patient year. And that is pretty comparable to what you see with AB blood type, which is, as you know, the shortest wait time across all blood types. So this was, again, another example of a policy that I think achieved its intent of improving the equity of the system, especially for a group of patients who are very reliant on the deceased donor pool to get their transplant. All right, so this, I mentioned I would show you kind of side-by-side comparison. I know this is really busy, but this is actually what goes on behind the scenes in the computer, essentially, right? So this is the actual algorithm scheme that is followed. So the top is the one prior to 2014 that I mentioned. The bottom is the one that was implemented in 2014, and I highlighted and read some of the aspects that we talked about. You can see, for example, if you have a high CPRA, you are first on that match run, essentially, to get offered those kidneys because of all those extra points that you get. So if your CPRA is 90 to 100 and a kidney becomes available, they're going to look at you first to potentially get that offer. You scroll down, you can kind of see where A2, the non-A1s kind of fall for the Bs. The local EPTS, so this is where we're trying to do the longevity matching. So if you look at the KDPIs of 0 to 20, if you look in that first column, the third bar in red, you can see the local EPTS 0 to 20. So this is trying to give the best kidneys to the patients with the highest survival post-transplant. They're trying to match that longevity. They actually tried at one point to match, I wouldn't say the worst kidneys, but the high KPI kidneys with the high EPTS scores. That didn't go so well. So the AARP had a lot to say about that, and that got shut down very quickly. So that did not happen. But there was an intent originally to do that, and that went away pretty fast. So now the system just gives the best kidneys to the best candidates in terms of post-transplant survival. And so you can kind of see where that all sort of falls. And then you can even see the local EPTS is part of that for 21 to 100% as well for the best kidneys. So there's some matching in that as well. So this is kind of how it runs. So the way we get a match run is, we don't actually see this when we log in. There's a system we use called UNET or DonorNet, and we just see the patients who are getting offered that kidney. But on the algorithm side, on the computer side, this is what it's running, right? It says, what's the KPI of the kidney? Where's the kidney? And let's run this algorithm. And this was all previously based on this map, essentially, right? So this was the OPO map that exists in the United States, still exists in the United States. So that algorithm was run based on what OPO you were listed in and where your center was located. Because that donor was being procured in that area as well. So you can see in Texas, we have a very unusual OPO map in my mind. So the blue, the TXSB, that's the Dallas OPO essentially. And then That does not include Fort Worth, by the way, even though DFW is a region, right? So that green is Houston's OPO. That is where Fort Worth falls. You guys are in the green. You are part of Houston's OPO, believe it or not. TXSA is San Antonio, that's a San Antonio OPO. So in the past, it was very common, and it made sense. If I lived in Texas, I would want to be listed in each of these three OPOs. Because the way this algorithm that I showed you ran, it ran based on the OPO, right? When the donor was in that OPO, when you were listed in the center of that OPO, that's how you got off of that kidney. So if you lived in Lubbock, it made sense to be listed at Houston Methodist, to be listed at Methodist San Antonio, and to be listed at UT Southwestern, because you get access to all three OPO organs. I'm going to show you now why that doesn't make much sense for patients anymore in the new allocation system. So the OPO boundaries exist, but currently the way the OPOs function, it's not really a unit of allocation anymore. It's a unit of procurement, meaning they just function as the service to procure the organs. There's no association of how the organs get allocated based on these OPO maps anymore. And I'm sure you've all heard of the news. The OPOs and these, they've been in a lot of trouble with a lot of congressional hearings because there's been some debate about how efficient they are and money wasting and things like that. So if you watch the news, you'll see some of the future. Anyway, so this is the newest system. Okay. This took me a while to figure out because, first of all, it's based on nautical miles, which I didn't know what the hell a nautical mile was. I had to look that up, first of all. So I don't think anyone knew what nautical miles unless you sail. But so here's what they did. They said allocation will now be done this way. There'll be a unit of a 250 nautical mile fixed circle drawn around the donor hospital. So there's a donor at a hospital. Let's draw a 250 nautical mile circle around the hospital. Okay? Now, let's look at candidates' total points. So they look at these points that are being added to the total allocation score. So the majority of that score is really their waiting time, right? That's the score. But now you also get some points based on the proximity of the potential recipient and based on where they're listed at the transplant hospital to the donor hospital. So if I have, like, Parkland is a trauma center in my area, right? Where I live in Dallas. It's down the street from me. A lot of donors come out of Parkland because it's the main trauma center in Dallas. If you're listed at UT Southwestern, you are very close to that donor hospital, so you're getting more points than if you were listed, say at Medical City, which is further away from Parkland. Not many more, but it does change as you get further out from the circle. So the candidates inside the circle receive a maximum of 2 proximity points, and they decrease linearly as you get further out from the 250 nautical mile circle, based on where the candidate would, such that the candidate would have no additional points once you hit the end of that circle. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense to anybody. But that's what they do. So you get points based on where the donor is and based on where you're listed, and they give you these points. And the whole point of this was to try to prevent shipping of organs all across the country, right? They want to try to keep the organs local, minimize shipping, keep it all where it can all be done, relatively easily around the donor hospital. If you get outside of that 250 mile circle, you can start to get points, especially if no one accepts it within that circle. And the way that works is, once you're outside the circle, you can get a maximum of 4 points to your waiting time, depending on, again, how close you are, the proximity of their center of listing to the donor hospital. Again, so it's all based on the center of listing to the donor hospital. And then the proximity points inside the circle are awarded when you get further out, up to 2,500 nautical miles from that donor hospital. So then they make the circle bigger and start giving you these 4 points. So no one accepts it in that 250 mile, they expand to 2,500, give you more points, and see if they can place the organ that way. I personally think it's very difficult to understand. I don't think anyone really fully understands it. I will tell you, we haven't had a huge impact in our offers because we're in a big city. I think where this has hurt people are people that live in smaller communities because they don't have the same number of donors and things that are happening. Like a lot of, if there's a trauma, you may be shipped out from your local community to a trauma center somewhere else, right? So I think it hurt smaller communities more, which I think is in some ways who they were trying to help to some extent, and I don't think it did. Anyway, this has been in place now for about 2 years almost. It's difficult to understand, but that's the system we have currently. The newest thing that was added, which I think all of you probably know about or have heard about, this came about in January 2023. So this was, again, an attempt to fix some of the equity issues in the allocation system and the listing system. This was all about race-neutral EGFR. So we're all nephrologists. We all know about this, right? We're all in these papers coming out about the equation we've been using for all these years was not right, and race was not a great variable to include, and newer, better formulas were evaluated. And UNOS looked at all this and said, okay, yes, so if there's a better formula that shows that an African American patient who otherwise had a GFR of 25 in that old formula, but their GFR is really 20 on the new formula, well, we should give them credit for that time that they lost because they didn't get referred because their GFR was too high. So that's essentially what this does. So this is this race-neutral eGFR. So we as a transplant center are required to use a race-neutral eGFR when we're listing patients now. And in January 2023, we had, I think it was up until, Leslie, what was it, July we had to fix this, or August, I forget. Yeah, I think we had until July to update our entire list, to go back of all of our African American patients and go back and see if they have qualified eGFRs in the new race-neutral equation that would get them more time. And we had about 180 African American patients that we had to go back and look at, and we had a good number of patients that got years of waiting time added to their listing date. So what we do now is we have all of our lists updated now, and now when you send us a patient, and the key is they self-identify as African American. That's the other key. It's not just if I say you're African American. They have to self-identify and say, well, all their forms are African American. That's number one. And then number two, when they come to us, what we do now when they're coming for new listing is we look back at any records we can get access to see if we can get them additional credit. So you may send us somebody who's been on dialysis for a year, but you've been seeing them for 5 years. If we get those records and we can show that GFR, they may get 3-4 years of wait time credited to it. And that happens pretty commonly now with our African American patients. So that was the race-neutral eGFR kind of rule that was put into place last year, again, to help some of this inequity issue that was happening. All right, so I talked about these low KDPIs going to low EPTS. I alluded earlier that I would talk about, when we're making these decisions about accepting kidneys, I said I would talk about some of the factors we look at. And what about high KDPI? So this I know is kind of sometimes a controversial one because patients are all like, why do I want one of these chronic kidneys, right? That's what they'll say to us. You're giving me a chronic kidney, doc, I want to stay on dialysis. So let's talk about why we use these and sort of what the rationale is and kind of what we look at. So this is a very good study that was done looking at 3 groups of patients. So looking at patients who are waitlisted for transplant. So they're either on dialysis or have an eGFR of 20 or less, so they're listed. But they have said, I do not want to take a high KDPI kidney. I want to wait for that 0 to 85 kidney. And then on the dash line, the bigger dash line, those are patients who are not yet on dialysis, who said, yes, you know what, I will take a high KDPI kidney. And then the smaller dash line are those who are on dialysis who said, I'll take a high KDPI kidney. And what you can see in the figure, this figure is looking at the patient survival. And these patients are all 60 years or older, by the way. And the solid line are the waitlisted patients who don't want a high KDPI kidney. You can see they have a higher mortality rate compared to those who said, I will take a high KDPI kidney. So you essentially have a survival benefit by taking a high KDPI kidney, meaning, like I showed in that earlier figure, getting off dialysis sooner is better. It will help your survival. And really the rationale for accepting this is, in general, you will get an offer a little bit quicker if you typically take a high KDPI kidney because it's not a kidney you can give to everybody. So it's interesting though, despite that, the willingness, when we changed in 2014 from ECD to standard criteria language, the willingness to accept these high KDPI kidneys actually went down nationally. And it's not really clear to me why that happened. I think it's because we as transplant centers needed to explain this better to patients and explain what did this mean. But you see that, the groups that would be helped the most, these over 65 and some of these in the pink line, the 50 to 64s, their willingness to accept them actually dipped, even though they would get a survival benefit from taking one of these kidneys. So we offer these to anybody who's 60 or older with diabetes. We feel that that's a group that definitely would benefit from getting off dialysis sooner, or anyone who's over 65 with any cause of ESRD. So that's kind of our protocol. We spend a lot of time in our evals talking about this type of kidney to patients who meet the criteria to get these, because we really feel that this is a way to get them transplanted more expeditiously and give them that survival benefit, which ultimately, as I said, the goal of the transplant is to help you live longer and have better quality of life. So that's what we're trying to achieve for our patients. So I do want to talk a little bit about biopsy. Whether you know this or not, kidneys are very commonly biopsied before they're procured. Actually, I'm going to be honest, I'll editorialize it, but it drives me nuts because I find biopsies do one thing for my surgeons. Gives them a reason not to do the transplant, which I hate. But it's done very commonly. So this is a very nice study that was done just in 2022, kind of looking at these roll of biopsies. It was a nice big meta-analysis that was done, looking at multiple studies of biopsies pre-transplant in deceased donors. So the first point I want to show is in table 2 in the top left. Almost over 70% of these kidneys are biopsied, right, that are being used. It's crazy to me. I mean, I've literally had organ offers that the surgeons told me about. 30-year-old did biopsies. Why are you biopsying a 30-year-old who has no medical history, died in a car accident? Makes no sense to me, but here we are. So we're biopsying kidneys. So what are the factors then that people think are important for why you biopsy? So I actually agree with the high importance one. So if a patient's older, maybe they had AKI, and maybe the urine output's slowing down, something like that. Maybe they were diabetic. Those might be reasons you want to biopsy it. But when you look at some of these medium importance reasons, high KDPI, DCD, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. And I'm going to show you some data on why I think that. But some of the reasons why we do it, I think, are to make ourselves feel better, that we're going to use this kidney as opposed to the actual objective data we have available, which is the terminal cranium of the donor, the urine output, and actual objective things that we know are going to play out. Because as you know, these biopsies are always done in the middle of the night. They're frozen. They're sent to some other center. They're not prepped properly. Like you would get a biopsy, you would biopsy a patient. And invariably, a couple days later, I get the final report when it was finally processed properly, and it looks night and day from what was read at 2 in the morning. So it's very tricky. So then, what do people think about the findings of the biopsy that are important? So you can see this is a bit across the map, but in general, patients think providers thought glomerular sclerosis was important to look at. 36% said it was highly important. Vascular changes, 43% said highly important. That I somewhat agree with. Then IFTA and arterial hyalinosis, 24, 35%. So, about a third of providers said these are highly important things that we want to look at. And you can see here that 72% in this paper, when they kind of surveyed providers, said that a favorable biopsy result would encourage them to accept a marginal donor. But 46% said that an unfavorable biopsy would make them decline an otherwise good donor. Crazy, in my mind. As I said, the biopsy only talks you out of doing the transplant. That's what I've learned over the years. So what's the role of the biopsy in terms of what does it tell you about the post-transplant outcome? So this is a table looking exclusively at the role of glomerular sclerosis in the biopsy findings. And if you look in the outcome association, that's kind of to the right of the figure, it's showing you graft failure, DGF, graft function. The kind of arrow, left to right arrow, is basically saying there's no association. Up, down, obviously means association versus not. You can see it's all over the map, right? There's no consistent theme here. Same thing for vascular injury. It's a bit across the map. A little more association with increase to some extent for DGF and for graft failure. And we do see that when you have moderate severe hyalinosis or arteriosclerosis. A little more association than we saw with glomerular sclerosis. Tubular interstitial changes, again, this is really across the map. I find IFTA is almost useless in these procurement biopsies. The end result of the authors who wrote this paper was that the results of all the papers were heterogeneous, and that they concluded that biopsy results did not predict post-transplant outcomes, pretty much. Percent of glomerular sclerosis was the most often examined, failed to predict graft survival in half the studies, and that the routine use of biopsies, and this is their discussion, so this is their editorializing, the routine use of biopsies help determine whether or not to transplant kidneys should be re-examined. And I completely agree with that. So, what we will do, we'll tend to look more at things like, what was the urine output of the donor? What was the terminal creatinine? Did they have AKI? What was their medical history? What is the KDPI? And then we put that in the context, and I think this is where we succeed to some extent as a transplant center. Just because we got the offer for a particular patient doesn't mean I have to give it to that patient. I can still accept the kidney, but that may not be the best kidney for that particular patient, right? I may get a KDPI offer of 84 in a donor with diabetes, and it's being offered first on my list to a 35-year-old. But 3 more patients down is a 65-year-old. Well, let's give it to them. That's a better matching of that kidney with a particular recipient. So if you spend a little more time looking at your match run list, which is what we do, and really try to match the best kidney for the best recipient, I think that's where you get really good success and you achieve some good results for the patient. So, when you look at donor AKI, this is an interesting one because this gets brought up a lot, especially when surgeons will call me and say, oh, donor has AKI, we want the kidney. Well, what does that mean? Well, so this is looking at the impact of AKI on the outcome of the recipient. So you can see it's without AKI, they had over 12,000 patients that they looked at. With AKI, again, over 12,000 patients. They also staged the AKI. And what do they find? Yes, you might have a little more delayed graft function if you use an AKI kidney. Makes sense, right? It has an AKI. But there's no increased risk of decreased creatinine in 6 months or 6-month eGFR. If you look, because the numbers are so high, it's being statistically significant. If you look at the GFRs, no matter what the stage, you have a GFR 58 versus 61 with AKI versus without. Pretty comparable eGFR, I'd say. Of course, if you have 24,000 patients, you can show small differences at p-values. So the AKI really has very minimal impact on the overall outcome of that transplant. All right. So I always end on a little bit about us and how this plays out into how we actually practice our role as transplant providers. So this is direct from our most recent SRTR report in January of this year. So this is our overall organ offer acceptance. This is obviously for deceased donors. You can see we're far to the right of the bell curve for organ offer acceptance. We're TXSP. It's when we used to be St. Paul's. I don't know if all of you know that's what it is. So before Clements University Hospital existed, St. Paul's program was doing transplant. So that's why we're TXSP. This is our observed versus expected rate of transplants per 100 person years. You can see our total transplant rate is 37. We were expected to be about 29, 30. So we're above our expected transplant rate per 100 person years. This is all the transplant programs in Texas. We're actually the largest deceased donor program in the state. Houston Methodist and Houston San Antonio do more living donors than we do at this time, but our plan is still to beat them in that, to be honest with you. That's my goal. But we're the largest deceased donor program in the state, and as of now, we're the third largest in the state. And we've made huge strides in reducing our waiting time. And I think this is very important for the patients because, as I showed, the longer you wait, the higher your risk of dying while you're waiting. So when I arrived in August of 19, you can see our wait times by blood type. These are our mean wait times by A, B, O, and B. And you can see what we've done to these. I actually didn't have 2023 data yet. I apologize. So this is still just 2022. We kind of summarized this all at the end of the year and just didn't get a chance to get it yet. But you can see we cut our wait times down dramatically across all blood types by being very aggressive with the organ offers and accepting those organs. And if you're going to accept the organs, the patients have to do well. Otherwise, there's no point because, as I mentioned earlier, we have to be good stewards of this scarce resource, right? So if I'm going to take these organ offers and give them to patients, we need the organ to do well. We need the patient to do well. So this is our patient and graft survival. So the left side is graft survival, and the right side is patient death. So it's really looking at graft failure. So we were expected to have 26 graft failures. We only had 13 in that cohort. We were expected to have almost 14 deaths. We had 8. So we have a lower graft failure and patient death rate compared to what would be expected from the SRTR model that they do. And this is just looking then at grafts, 1 3-year graft survival. Who are the other bars, you may ask? They are all the programs that compete for our business in Lubbock, actually. So these are programs in San Antonio. These are programs in Dallas. These are programs in New Mexico. These are programs in Oklahoma. I thought that I toyed with the idea of leaving the names up. I thought that seemed a little rude. So I took the names away. And I just love to argue. And again, this is from the January SRTR report. You can see we are the only program that has 1 3-year outcomes for the graft survival that is above our expected. So the darker blue for us is the observed, the lighter blue is what was expected based on the SRTR algorithm or modeling. And then the darker gray is observed, lighter gray is the expected. So you can see we're the only ones that are above both of those benchmarks for our program. And as you know, we have a huge presence here in Lubbock in our collaboration with UMC and Texas Tech. So this is just looking at, it's hard to see, but the left is the referrals that have come in, and we've had a really record year of referrals last year. So I thank all of you who've sent us patients to be evaluated for transplant. And then The bottom left are those who were actually under evaluation. Sometimes they get screened out for insurance, so the mean line might be 50, things like that. We have a couple things that will screen them out in the front, and throw chronic oxygen that will screen them out. Then the top right is actually those who we waitlisted, and the bottom right are those that have been transplanted. So you can see we've been growing, and I think with the referrals as they've been, it seems like it's going to continue this year. As we get more referrals in, we'll do more transplants. So I think that's my last slide. I will end there. I'm happy to take questions, but I know everyone wants to keep eating and drinking, so I don't want to slow things down. Thank you.
Thank you. I have questions. Do you guys have any questions?
Please.
Are you telling us then that it's safer to tell our patients to move closer?
Oh.
It's 348 at least statute miles.
No, it won't matter. If they're listed in Dallas, they'll get that benefit.
Oh.
Because it's where the listing hospital is in relation to the donor hospital.
So not for the patient lives.
Not where the patient lives, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So in other words, we can't really list them here in Lubbock.
I didn't say that. I did not say that. I did not say that. I did not say that. No, I mean, it's great to have a local program, right? I mean, I think that's great for you guys. Because, it's nice for the patients. I think one benefit, at least the way we run things is, I think we're one of the few of the centers that come in from the outside that have a team here that's based here. So I'm sure all of you know Leslie. Melissa's our manager in that clinic. We have a team based here in Lubbock. We come out as docs once a week on Tuesdays to do the clinic, where we see pre and post patients. So, but when you call us to talk to us about transplant, you're calling Leslie here in Lubbock, or you're calling Karen, our post coordinator. So they're locally based, and they know everybody. Leslie seems to know everybody. So when we go anywhere, Leslie knows everybody. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, good. That means I can get wine now.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, and speaking of wine, we still have time. I think it's 7:30 that we're closing the bar, so we'll give you our last calls and stuff like that. Still gonna ask. Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Simfukwe, and he is the medical director of the South Plains Bariatric Clinic, and also, let me get your slides up here, nephrologist, medical director of several of the dialysis centers here in town. So we asked him to speak about weight issues. So Dr. Simfukwe, if you're ready.
This should be good.
Anyway, my topic is going to be on why can we not keep the weight off once we lose it? I know, we need to talk about the obesity and kidney disease. I will touch upon that, but I'm going to concentrate more on the management of obesity. That way, we have some way of managing and reducing the risk of kidney disease when it comes to obesity. So, let me see.
Sorry, you have the clicker?
Yes. I don't want to turn it off.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh. As you can see, the objectives, I'm going to talk about what is the definition of obesity and what the causes are. We'll also touch on the biochemistry of obesity. Also, we'll talk about why the weight won't stay off. And then we'll look at the new treatments, in obesity. When it comes to obesity, the medical dictionary defines obesity as the abnormal accumulation of body fat, usually 20% or more, over an individual's ideal body weight. which is expressed as BMI. The Obesity Medicine Association definition is a chronic relapsing multifactorial neurobehavioral disease wherein an increase in body fat mass, physical forces, resulting in adverse metabolic, biochemical, and psychosocial health consequences. Just to touch a little bit on obesity and kidneys, when we look at obesity, there are lots of hemodynamic changes that happen, and usually, those lead to an increase in, blood volume, which can also, cause an increase in cardiac output, and that just kind of cascades and goes on, resulting in hyperfiltration, when it comes to kidneys, and with that also comes the increased pressure, within the kidneys and the glomeruli, causing the damage that's sometimes associated with obesity. And also there's the insulin resistance, that can happen in somebody who is obese. Other things that can happen, dyslipidemia, which can also have damaging consequences when it comes to kidneys as well. Causes of obesity, their genetic factors, in most adults, 40 to 70% of obesity is contributed by, has genetic contributions. So the other 30% is elsewhere. If you look at if one parent is obese, the kids are 3 to 4 times likely to have, 3 to 4 times increase in risk of getting obesity or being obese. And if it's 2 parents, that jumps to about 10 times the increased risks. We also know, from the genetic mapping that has been done, that we have hundreds of genetic loci that have been identified, but according to the studies that have been done, testing is not clinically useful when it comes to those loci. Examples, rather, of some of the other genetic factors, genetic diseases are the leptin and leptin receptor deficiency, and we'll talk about leptin when we get to the biochemistry. These are some of the hormones that get produced and released, in obese patients or in anybody. Some control hunger, some control how we metabolize our food. Biological factors, pregnancy. Women who get pregnant for the first time, weight gain is not completely lost after delivery. So you can have an accumulation of weight over several pregnancies. Menopause is another factor. There's weight gain and increased central fat distribution in early menopause, and the hormonal changes in menopause, contribute to that. And then we have illnesses like Cushing's that can cause obesity. Sleep deprivation is also a risk factor. If you're not getting enough sleep for, adults, about 7 or more hours. For teenagers, they need a little over 8 hours of sleep a day, and for kids, that goes up to probably about 10, 12 hours, that they need of sleep. And then we have drugs like steroids and antidepressants, and then the new studies on gut microbiome. So behavioral factors, we've all taken care of a patient who comes in, and you ask them about, their calorie intake. They always underreport the calorie intake, and when you ask them how much are you exercising, they always say, "Oh, I'm doing a lot of exercise." But studies have shown that, and they've been consistent, that patients overestimate how much they exercise and underestimate how much they eat. How much their calorie intake is. Other behavioral causes are sedentary lifestyle. If you're not exercising, that weight will continue to accumulate. Smoking cessation. With smoking, there's certain receptors in the POMC that kind of increase the metabolism when somebody is smoking because of the nicotine. And once you stop smoking and the nicotine kind of goes away, you don't have that increase in metabolism that goes with the nicotine that you are taking in. The other thing is adopting restrictive diets and unsustainable exercise regimens. So you have to adopt diets that are not fads, that will help you learn how to eat better, learn how to take care of yourself better. So that's one thing. And also the exercise regimens that you adopt, they have to be, exercises that will help you lose weight. Yeah. The recommendation right now is that you have to do both cardio and strengthening. You just can't do cardio by itself. You have to do cardio and strengthening. For women, you don't want to be heavy weightlifting, so you bulk up. That's not what we're looking for. But that's for men. For women, we want you to tone, but also have a goal of strengthening when it comes to weight loss. When it comes to socioeconomic factors, obesity is lowest among the highest income and the most educated. And so part of that also has to do with the living conditions. Your neighborhood may have a park, your neighborhood may have trails, that you can walk in. And also the schools that you go to, depending upon what, they serve to kids, for their meals, those can be high in calorie content in some school districts, and some can offer, healthy meal plans. Environmental factors, we've seen an increase in the, the high or high calorie content foods that are now palatable, and they're very inviting. So that's one of the things that we're seeing changed. And if you look at the the data below, in the 1970s, we consumed about 2,398 kilocalories per day per person. But in 2000, in the 2000s, we went up to 2895 kilocalories per day per person. You know, and so if you look at the just the difference in the kilocalories, that's part of where the weight comes from. You know, we talked about the biochemistry of obesity. You know, some of the biochemicals that have been noted include leptin, which which is a hormone that regulates appetite and energy expenditure. Ghrelin is one that stimulates appetite and changes. Ghrelin stimulates appetite, and then there are changes in the hormones that may increase hunger and promote overeating. So if you have changes in some of those, biochemicals, that's what can happen. We talked about POMC. You know, if you have a deficiency that causes severe obesity, but that's seen mainly in young kids. It's early in childhood, you know, around age 5, you start to see that change. Patients also have, they also have low levels of ACTH and tend to have red hair and pale skin. So in the, continuing with the biochemistry, in the adipose tissue, it can also secrete what they call adipokines and hormones. You know, leptin is one that we talked about. And can also cause, excretes things like angiotensin, angiotensinogen, adiponectin, and these can dysregulate renal function and contribute to inflammation, fibrosis and hypertension. So we want to kind of make sure that obesity is managed in a way that we start to reduce the number of patients that we're seeing, with this condition. Anyway, ACTH is a hormone released in the pituitary gland. It plays a role in how body responds to stress. So it triggers the adrenal gland to produce cortisol, the stress hormone, which regulates metabolism, and androgens, sex hormones. And so, when you're in a flight, flight or fight situation and you're stressed, you're going to produce cortisol, in that situation. And we know cortisol is also a steroid that can cause central obesity. And too much stress has also been noted as a risk factor for obesity as well. Talking about, when you lose weight, okay, some of the things that will cause you to maintain that weight, so foods that cause weight gain are your potato chips, your French fries, any processed meats, your red meat, your sweets, and your desserts. And then the foods that, protect against weight gain are your fruits, yogurt, whole grains, nuts, and vegetables. But when it comes to the ultra-processed foods, observational studies found an association between eating these foods that are associated with industrial food production and contain food additives with development of obesity. So your ultra processed, your boxed, your canned goods and things like that. We have to tell patients that they need to stop, avoiding foods like that. Physical inactivity is the most variable component of energy expenditure. We expend energy in physical activity. Reduction in exercise and increase in sedentary time, is another reason why weight comes back on and you don't keep it off. Then there's also the metabolic adaptation. When you lose weight, your BMR tends to slow down. Your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories that your body expends when if you wake up and just lay in bed all day, without being active at all, that's going to be your basal metabolic rate. So your BMR tends to slow down when you lose weight because you're losing mass and less body mass to maintain, so the body adapts to a lower calorie intake. It makes it easier to regain weight when you restart your normal eating habits. So one of the goals is to see if we can help patients learn how to eat and maintain those habits, during the time that they're with you, on that weight loss journey. So once they leave the program, they can continue to do what they've learned, from your clinic. Yeah, physiology of weight-reduced state. Following weight loss, your peripheral and central mechanisms respond in a way similar to starvation by conveying a sense that energy reserves have dwindled, activating strong counter-response to increased calorie intake. And so, some patients will start to feel hungrier than they were before they started losing weight. Because the body wants to regain that weight back and some more. Your physiology, the BMR drops causing weight rebound. We've talked about counter-regulatory adaptations may be permanent. So that's why in some patients they can't lose weight no matter what they do. So. We have the new treatments that are the rage right now. Your Saxenda, which is liraglutide, that one's been out the longest, but it's kind of rarely used. We don't see it come through as much. Wegovy was the next one of the three medications that you see around. Wegovy, which is just Ozempic, which is just semaglutide, came next, and then there's Zepbound, which is the Mounjaro. Wegovy is by Novo Nordisk company, and the Zepbound Mounjaro is by Lilly. So, and here recently, they've formulated a sublingual semaglutide, so you don't have to take, the weekly injections. So, yeah. And then future treatments, not sure. So, when it comes to treatment, lifestyle modifications, dietary interventions, and physical activity recommendations that we've talked about. And then the fountain of youth is always water, 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 water. I had a long list of references, so just to kind of make sure that I let everybody know, I didn't, come up with all this information, so, so I want to cover myself. So, and I can provide you with a copy if you want one. Any questions? Mine is brief.
I have a question. Do you see a lot of dialysis patients in your clinic, or is it?
Usually, most dialysis patients that I see in the dialysis centers.
Right, but for the weight loss.
For weight loss.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
you'll see them there.
We had
Okay.
one patient that, this project, this project, really, Dr. Starnes and I kind of started working on it, but he had some other things to do, and that's why he's not up here talking.
Yeah. He's always so busy.
Yeah. We had one patient that we put on phenamine, lost his weight and got a kidney transplant. So, but we were lucky, we had to select that patient because of the, one of the side effects of these stimulants is cause blood pressure to go up. And that was the reason Dr. Starnes and I wanted to kind of find ways to help patients who were obese and could not get on the transplant list. So, but yeah, that one patient, so that was luck. Yeah.
Do you tend to have to follow them after transplant for gaining their weight back, or has that happened? Or do they pretty much maintain their weight after transplant? The one that you had to help lose the weight.
Yeah, well, it's only one right now. We see him in clinic, and he's maintained his weight so far. And I think part of it is because now with the kidney transplant, he's more active than he was before.
I also think the timing of your speech at this
Yeah, we were all eating dessert. Sorry. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Oh, let me turn
Oh, thank you. Okay, so before I have our last speaker come up, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I also want to thank our committee, and we have several board members here as well. So thank you guys all for coming and supporting, and especially I want to thank our chair for this event. So that's Dr. Villa. So anyway, so our last speaker is Dr. Villa, and he, I didn't look, nephrology specialist in Lubbock. I can go on, right? And he's going to talk about chronic care management and RPM. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and today the presentation is something completely different. I mean, it's about chronic care management and RPM. I think it's important for taking care of patients, no matter what the specialty is, primary care, nephrology, cardiology, and taking advantage of the RPM. So chronic care management it's important to mention the CMS recognized chronic care management as a critical primary care service that contribute to better patient health care. The goal is to help the patients stay engaged, to be proactive in their own care, make it possible for them to continue meeting health goals between the scheduled appointments. There are several CPT codes for chronic care management. And the important part here, I think, is an opportunity for providers to receive reimbursement for the care they provide to the patient with multiple chronic conditions, while improving patient satisfaction and outcome. Chronic care management is a critical component of primary care that contributes to better outcome again and higher satisfaction for patients. Patient receive many benefits from chronic care management. Your patient will get a team that is dedicated to healthcare professionals who can help them to plan for better health and stay on track. Patient will receive a comprehensive care plan, encouraging patients to use chronic care management, give them the support they need between visits. Got interested in this last year, and after a company came to practice talking about the opportunity to get involved into chronic care management and RPM, and after looking at that, we decided to engage into this back in August, and we've been doing it since then. Chronic care management support your practice also because improve care coordination, support patient compliance, and help patients feel more connected. It is for sure. You're going to see how the patients, when they're in this system, they feel like closer to them, that you pay more attention to them, and they feel like you care more for them, even if you don't. So it's sustain and grow your practice. So I have to mention that there are different CPT codes in this chronic care management, and there's some complex CPT codes and other CPT codes that are not complex. And the complex, for example, there's a couple of them here, 87 and 89. The practitioner should report the service code at the conclusion of at the end of the month. In addition to specify clinical staff service time, I think that's the key. Most of these services could be provided from the staff, and physician has not to be present. And the physician has to supervise and has to follow the supervision and the plan of the patient. But the physician does not have to be present. For example, there's a couple of examples of staff CPT codes. Talk a little bit more later, 9 and 39. Now, there's some services that you cannot combine. When you do this chronic care management RPM, you cannot combine them, for example, with hospice care, home health, or some ESRD services. But this is only the exclusions. Besides this, these codes could be done in any other circumstances. Again, there's some CPT codes for chronic care management provided by clinical staff. This I mentioned here. And these ones cannot be reported at the same time the ones done by the physicians. Now, when it comes to a couple of them specifically, here we have the 99490. This code, it is 20 minutes over a 30-day period. It's non-complex, so it could be done for anybody at the office. It's not face-to-face. That's the only important thing. This is not face-to-face. This is by phone. You just talk to the patient for 20 minutes. And it's done by the staff. And the reimbursement nationally is about $62 for this. And the idea that I'm trying to present here is that when you combine all these CPT codes, and this is a good program for the patients, provide good service for the patient, and increase reimbursement for the doctor. I mentioned another one here that is 99439. This code is for additional 20 minutes for the clinical staff. Again, so with that in mind, the clinical staff could spend 20 minutes in the first code, an extra 20 minutes in the same patient. And this could be doable, and Medicare supports, and Medicare wants us to do this. There's other CPT codes here. There is 87. This 87 code is covered as a complex. This one in particular has a reimbursement of about $133 per month per patient. This is about 60 minutes, and again, it's by the clinical staff. And what we do during this time is the clinical staff, anybody in the office, has to talk to the patient, has to look at the blood pressure control, discuss the patient. It could be done. Another 189 is another 30 minutes, is complex. Another 191, 85. Now, chronic care management could be combined with RPM. They're completely different. Chronic care management just includes that you talk to the patient. You'll discuss with the patient whatever problem you want to address with him. Hypertension, diabetes, obesity, shortness of breath, whatever problem it is. And RPM is another program that you give the patient a machine, either for blood pressure, blood sugar, and then you could combine these two codes. So you could do chronic care management and RPM. Now, who can do this? Anybody at the office, pretty much from anybody at the office that is part of the staff, as long as under the supervision of the physician, and the physician sees the plan, anybody could spend these times with the patient to build these goals. Supervision is what is important. So, for example, again, the doctor has to be controlling this. And again, the doctor has not to be present during this. Who is eligible? You have to have 2 chronic medical conditions. All of our patients have at least 2 medical conditions. And this is just one example of the medical conditions that make the patient qualify for this. Almost anything qualify for this. COPD, diabetes, hypertension. 2 of those, the patient qualifies for it. Now, there's an initial visit when you enroll the patient. So pretty much in the initial visit, what happened is the patient gets there. It could be during a regular visit. Like you have the patient for a follow-up visit and you could say, do you want to enroll into this program? This is the advantage. This is what I'm going to do for you. And then that is what it will be. In that initial visit is billed separately too. The patient has to have a consent, verbal or written. The patient has to be consent, and we talk to the patient, we get consent, and the patient get enrolled. Now, there has to be a comprehensive care plan. Most of the EHR has comprehensive care plans in it. And I don't know what EHR each one of you use, but the EHR has already in there a comprehensive care plan that is to address these chronic care conditions. But it has to be there. It has to be documented. It's part of the requirement by Medicare that you have a comprehensive care plan. Now, one of the advantages is that something that the patient gets for this, but that's what we do anyway. We provide 24-hour access to the patient to a physician, either because it's you taking care of the patient or because there's somebody else on call for you. So, but the patient has to have access 24/7 to somebody. But I don't think this is different to what we're doing these days. Our patients has access to us, either directly to us or to whoever is on call for us. Again, there's a comprehensive care management, and the idea is that when we see the patients, we review the medications, we look for preventive, we do coordination, we do care transitions, and pretty much continue to take care of patients. Now, RPM, that is just what I mentioned, is combined chronic care management with RPM. So you got a chronic care management, and then you combine the 2 of them. It's obtaining data to provide the right care at the right time. Now, the role of the remote patient monitoring and healthcare utilization management. RPM is a revolutionary healthcare approach that leverages advanced technology solutions to enable ongoing monitoring of patient health metrics outside conventional clinical setting. RPM fosters a continuous and proactive healthcare strategy by facilitating remote data transmission from patients to healthcare providers, personalized and ongoing connection, and reactive to proactivity. In our practice, we do pretty much hypertension. So basically, we get a blood pressure machine, it is synchronized to the computer, and the patient takes the blood pressure at home, how many times you want him to take it, and that transmits the information from there directly to your EHR. So the information gets directly to your office. We bring the data, and anytime you review the data of your blood pressure, and then you write there what you want the patient to do, and that's what it is about. But it could be done also for blood sugar. It could be done also for oxygenation. In our cases, we do pretty much hypertension. The patient takes the reading, is synchronized with the platform, and real-time data enables preventive care. Remote care programs, remote physiological monitoring or remote patient monitoring. We have, for example, you could have therapeutic monitoring, chronic care management, complex chronic care management, or principal care management. Now, RPM allows the healthcare providers to remotely monitor and manage their patient health daily in real time between scheduled office visits. RPM, patients are given digital devices to test blood pressure, blood sugar, oxygen, among others, and measure or weight in the comfort of their own homes. A report from Plus Research found that RPM was successful in reducing hospitalizations by as much as 38%. Additionally, RPM was associated with a 25% increase in patient satisfaction, a 25% reduction in ER visits, and a 25% reduction in readmission, and 70% reduction in cost. That's one of the reasons why Medicare is a proponent of this. Now, chronic care management versus remote patient monitoring. Providers can bill for both, like you mentioned, RPM and chronic care management. You could bill for both of them. For example, billing 57 and 490 together require a provider to deliver 40 minutes of service, 20 minutes of RPM, and 20 minutes of chronic care management. Again, it's just 20 minutes reviewing the data that was printed and it was transmitted from the patient to the computer. There are valuable healthcare tools that enable providers to manage patient care between office visits. What distinguishes the two is that chronic care management offers a comprehensive care plan, ongoing patient support and education, while RPM provides device to monitor patients' physiologic data and then send the results directly to the healthcare provider in real time. In conclusion, chronic care management is an essential aspect of healthcare that involves providing known face-to-face services to patients with 2 or more chronic conditions. According to the World Health Organization, chronic care diseases are responsible for 75% of all deaths worldwide. The WHO estimates that around 41 million people die globally each year from chronic diseases such as heart failure, cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory disease. RPM is a complementary technology gaining traction in healthcare that involves using connected device to collect and transmit health data from patient to healthcare providers. Adding RPM and chronic care management can significantly benefit the patient with chronic conditions and their healthcare providers. Thank you. Maybe?
Any questions?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Dr. Leah.
My pleasure, baby.
Okay, so anybody who's end-stage kidney disease is not eligible for CCF.
If you look at the CPT codes that were there, if you look at them, there's on the CPT codes, there's some dialysis, the hemodialysis code, yes, but if you look at the other ones, they were not. So some CPT codes and ESRD qualify for it, and the other ones not. I could provide you a list of the ones that qualify for it and the ones that don't qualify for it.
We use some for like remote blood pressure monitoring with our dialysis.
Yes. Like I said, so some of them qualify, some of them not. Yeah, but that's the question, and I'll give you a list of the ones that qualify and the ones that don't. Okay.
Any other questions?
What was that?
So we are pros, so we are okay.
I have a question, Dr. David. So I live in New Mexico, you know that. We in hops, not all of our patients have internet access. How's the data transmitted?
No, it's not. The blood pressure machine gets set up at the office.
Okay.
So basically, when Matthew tell us how we do the.
So when the patients come in and we want to start on the remote blood pressure monitoring, we set them up at the machine there in the office, and you have to put in some codes in the computer, and just before they leave, we just make sure we take the blood pressure and it transmits to our system, and if so, they can take it home and it should keep transmitting.
So it's not Wi-Fi? I mean, it's not, how does it?
Cellular?
Don't ask how.
So the machine has its own cell service?
Yes.
now?
It does. The machine
It's not Wi-Fi
does.
based.
It's not a Wi-Fi based. It's not Wi-Fi based.
So that, it did work today.
I'm sorry. What is it?
Does anyone have a verbal blood sugar monitor?
Verbal.
Verbal.
Haven't heard about it.
One that reads the sugar.
Let them read the sugar out loud.
Yeah.
Trey
I think
has a
there are
sugar patient
Yeah.
who is blind on dialysis. There is no one in the house to help him with his insulin. And when we cannot,
What is
right
it?
now, I've got a way to get a home health nurse in there 3 times a week. Because wounds heal up, we're gonna be in trouble because we've tried just about everything on oral hypoglycemics, and he is hypo.
And I want to mention this, I really think this helps the patients, it does. And when it comes to the revenue, I think in average, a patient that is enrolled in this could provide about $200 per month in this system. The patients feels better, the patient appreciate that, the patient like it, and the numbers indicate that the patients for sure avoid hospitalizations and readmission. So I personally think that the combination of doing this chronic care management with RPM is beneficial for everybody.
And it notifies you when there's a high blood pressure or like critical
Yes.
numbers
You get
immediately.
Live data. So basically, the patient take it, you get it in the computer.
You get like
It's
an
up to
alert
you.
somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Do you know, are there a lot of clinics or anything doing that locally? I mean, do you know if they are? Or?
Is anybody here doing it?
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
We're out of Grace. We started a CCM program probably 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And so one of my elderly
How's it working for you?
clients, very well. Most people enroll and they never unenroll. And my nursing staff upstairs uses it. I mean, they're 20 to 40 minutes per patient.
So is it like different times? You know, you talk to them for 5 minutes one day or 1 week and next week, and so it's checking in. And,
Yes.
oh, okay, so it's not 20 altogether
No, they
necessarily.
cold call them and then you just accrue all that timing, and then once you can estimate and show that you've done that, you can put them in. So.
Cool. Cool. And any clinics can do it, right? I mean,
Anybody can do
any.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're done a little bit early. I think we have 3 minutes left for the bar. So if anybody wants the bar, we've got 3 minutes left. So again, I just want to thank all of our sponsors out there, and I know that you guys have all talked to them and walked by. I'm trying to find where they are. Oh, there they are. Just make sure you stop at the booths. I don't know if there's still people out there or not, but please feel free to do that. Again, tomorrow, like I said, you're welcome to come tomorrow. We have several other speakers as well. But there are no CMEs for that, but you guys are welcome to that. Again, thank you to our committee and our chair. And I think you guys, do you know where to go to do your evaluations? Do you put that up again? Okay, let me find that. There it is, covenanthealth.inreachce.com. So you need to complete that to get your evaluation. And I was gonna say something else, but I can't. Any other questions you guys have? I appreciate everybody coming, and if there's a place on there to do recommendations for talks next year, things like that, please let us know. You know, this is for you, and we want to give you good information. So I appreciate all our speakers this evening, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
There's 25 problems listed. 25 minutes.
What was I gonna ask? I just put it on there.
I turned it off. Well, it's live. I just didn't want to walk past it.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah, really. Yeah.
We're up to a live stream.